Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. In my time before I ran this little farm here, I was a professional grower for many years, and I picked up a few tips, a few techniques around watering plants, particularly those that are in pots. So I want to explain some of those to you today, and the first thing I want to discuss is how to know if your plant needs water when it's in a pot, because it doesn't always tell you quite so easily as having the foliage wilting. In fact, this plant looks just fine. However, it does need water, and I can tell that first of all just from the weight of the pot. Now, to do this method, of course, you have to have some point of reference to how heavy a pot should be if it's full of water. So the other way that I can do this is just by tipping the plant out of the pot, which I do pretty frequently just to check the condition of the roots anyway, and then have a look and a feel. Look is to see if there are lighter colored patches within the soil, and there is on this. It's not a uniformly dark color, and in terms of feel, it doesn't actually feel too wet. I can get a little bit of moisture on the bottom here, but overall this is tending towards fully dry, and I bet you if I left it for another day that you would start to see the wilt on the top growth of the plant. So this one needs some water, so I want to follow this up now with doing a demonstration between two pots here, between watering techniques that you may find quite interesting. One of my favorite anecdotes from my time working for a wholesale grower had to do with this exact test that we tried, comparing two methods of watering. The one method would soak the plant from top and bottom over a short duration just prior to shipping to see if that could get enough water into the pot. The other method took multiple smaller or shorter cycles trying to get water into the pot, and we had to see which one worked better. Now, this was a friendly debate between professionals, and the result won't surprise you if you know a little bit about how soil becomes hydrophobic. So I'm going to show you as I soak this one for about 30 seconds going into a tub. What you'll see is, of course, that I'm pouring tons of water into this plant, and it's also soaking from the top, but it's accumulating in the bottom of the bucket, so it's actually soaking from the top and the bottom of this plant, but over a short duration. And when I pull it out of that bucket, it is going to be dripping water everywhere. It just has tons of water in this plant, so it's been very heavily watered over a short duration. The other method that we would try is this one here, is I'm going to just give it shorter durations of water, and I'm talking like 5 seconds of water at a time. I'm going to give 5 seconds of water, let it rest for 10 minutes, then give it 5 more seconds of water, then rest for 10 minutes, and so on until I've given them roughly the equivalent length of time in the water, and then see which one gets more wet. Let's look at the results. First, on the one that I drenched and put into the tub, so it was being watered from the bottom and from the top at the same time. That's this one here. And unfortunately, even though it got that heavy dose of water, what I can see down the center of the side of the pot here is dry soil all the way through the center section. The top is a little bit wet and the bottom is a little bit wet, but the center just didn't soak in that water quickly enough. This is something that would be indicative of hydrophobic nature of potting soil. Potting soil, when it gets quite dry, sometimes has a hard time getting wet again, or getting wet again quickly, let's say. It needs time between waterings to get that water to distribute and sponge and wick all the way across the soil profile, so that one very heavy watering, although it is heavier now, it certainly is lacking water in certain patches of the pot. Let's have a look at the other one. This one here I did in 5-second intervals, and I just did it, I think I did it 4 times, because by the time I hit it by the 4th time, it was wet all the way across. Remember, I gave it 10 minutes in between each watering for that water to move up and down the soil profile and re-wet some of that dry material in the center. So now, no matter which way I turn this, no matter where I look in the pot, I can't find any section of this that isn't uniformly watered from top to bottom. So the conclusion I would draw from this is, unlike you would say in the landscape, where the rule of thumb is water heavily but infrequently, the rule of thumb when you're dealing with a plant in a pot is actually either not to let it fully dry out, or if it has dried out, then water lightly but more frequently. It kind of counterintuitive to the advice that you'd get in the landscape, but for plants in a pot it actually works. Let's talk for a minute about drought tolerance, because a whole range of perennials that you would consider drought tolerant in the landscape are not so in a pot. This one here is common yarrow or achillea, just in the red color. And again, in landscape, it would use its most excellent root system to search the surrounding soil for access to water, and it would supply the plant. Here in the pot, it doesn't have those options, so it's going to run out of water very quickly. In fact, this pot is pretty much out right now. Which brings me to my next point about plants in pots, is that once you start to see a wilt in a pot, it can be a serious issue and proceed to serious damage or permanent damage fairly quickly. In the landscape, you see a little bit of wilt. Again, the plants use the benefit of their root systems to continue to try to pull water from that, from the surrounding soil. Here it has no options. Once it's out, it's out. And so that wilt can turn to permanent tissue damage, which will show up as brown or permanent brown or blackened stems, or just death of the plant relatively quickly as compared to the landscape. So you have to be right on top of watering. So I'm going to say this about anything that you see as a drought tolerant perennial or plant, is don't assume it's drought tolerant in the pot. It's only drought tolerant in the landscape once well established. The final thing I want to talk about today is the edge effect, and this is the point where plants on the front edge of the crop or the side edge of the crop always dry out faster than the ones in the middle. Let me show you a couple pots here. This one from the far edge, and you pull it out and it is light brown and very light. Doesn't have a lot of moisture in that pot. If I go to the center, however, and pull out this pot, and I can see much darker color and much heavier. So the edges dry out quicker, and that's owing to just the distribution of humidity within the crop. As it's releasing its moisture and transpiring its moisture, the ones in the center get the benefit of being shielded from all that moisture loss. Because of this edge effect, I water crops a little bit differently, and here you'll see what I'm doing is I'm watering the front and side edges just 1 or 2 pots deep, all the way to the front and the back. And then I'll walk away from a minute and I'll go ahead and I'll water different crops over to the right or to the left. And then once I return to this crop here, and remember, it takes 5-10 minutes for that water to soak in and start sharing amongst. And if those ones on the edges are very dry, you want to give them that time to absorb the water. Then I'll return and I'll do the edges a second time, and then I'll give a light watering to the ones in the center as well, trying to even them up. And then I might go and water some more crops for a little while, and then in 10 more minutes I might return once again, very thoroughly do those edges, just again 1 or 2 pots deep, and then even up the center of the crop. Because the centers don't need quite so much water, they aren't going to need all that time to absorb it. So I really do focus my concentration in watering on keeping those edges from wilting out and getting damaged. All right, thanks for watching today. And if you have any questions about watering, hey, I'm happy to give you some guidance that way, and I'll see what I can do to help.